Good afternoon. Welcome everyone. 2003 Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency Budget Workshop and our regular meeting. So I will now call this meeting to order at 3:00 p.m. As I've indicated in our last meeting, I expect all participants at this meeting to conduct themselves professionally. I want each of us to treat others with respect and to exhibit to the public that all the commissioners, directors, on some issue, our common goal is what is in the best interest of our community. So consistent with the requirements of the Robert's Rules of Order, I will also ask all of my directors, commissioners on the dais to please direct your remarks through the chair and let me recognize you before you speak. And after our last meeting last month, some of the members of the audience indicated to me that from time to time they could not understand or hear comments from the directors. And apparently we tend to begin talking into the mic, but we move away or we don't project our voice. So directors, commissioners, if you will please make sure you're speaking directly into the mic so that the public can hear you and so that our clerks can take good minutes, good records for us. Before we begin, we have a request from Commissioner Proctor and Richardson to participate via WebEx. So I would like for them to participate. Is there a motion? Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Madam Chair, I make the motion that our directors who are participating telephonically be allowed to do so.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Minor. Are you ready for the question?
Call the question.
All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none. Commissioner Proctor and Richardson, are you all online? Okay, you have to connect in. I didn't understand you.
Waiting on Commissioner Richardson.
Have Proctor. We do not have Richardson at this time.
We'll wait a second for Commissioner Richardson.
Commissioner Richardson is jumping on in about 5 minutes. So
Okay.
Move forward.
So if you'll let us know when he's on, but we're going to move forward. The first portion of our agenda is the budget workshop item for the proposed 5-year capital improvement plan and for the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency, and then along with recommendations for our consideration. Last meeting, we previously approved budgets for both infrastructure and OEV. But today, as we get started, Mr. Chair, are there any modifications?
No, Madam Chair, there are no.
Okay, and Mr. Artie White, this is his first time as the new Director of Police. We want to welcome him and congratulate him.
Madam Chair.
So there are no gender modifications from Blueprint. Are there any gender modifications from?
Madam, I would like to pull, if possible, consent item number 4 to general business, please.
Consent item number 4, you'd like to pull it?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
Are there any other application? And that is
Madam
a good
Chair?
idea. If you have a comment, please just remain plate. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I would like to pull item 6 from consent.
Okay. Number 4 and
Thank
6. So I believe we need a motion to pull those items. Am I correct? Just say that. Okay. So we don't necessarily items 4 and 6 are pulled from the consent agenda. Are there any to be heard, Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
How many do we have?
We have 2 speakers in the room, 1 online. First speaker is Max Epstein, followed by Bill Peoples.
Thank you.
Name and address for the record, please.
Want to make sure. Okay, Max Epstein, 1001 San Luis Road. My first comments are about the budget here, but it has to do with Capital Cascades 4. Number one, I think when you look at this budget workshop, the expectation from Blueprint is we're going to have a 16.5% increase in money coming in next year. That means we're either going to the bull market in history, or we're going to experience hyperinflation. Money that we may not get. So when you're making decisions, think about that. Number two is the budget for Capital Cascades 4, which you also are going to be approving. Somehow, June 27th of 2019, this project was changed. As you can see, you had a consent agenda item to reconcept and design something that alleviates flooding and improves water quality south of Orange Avenue because they wanted to avoid taking large amounts of property. I don't really understand where that came from other than the Capital Cascades 3DB fiasco. So what were they supposed to do? They're supposed to bring it back to you, the results of this model, and an updated project to the board, and then you were supposed to vote on it to move forward into the design. None of that has happened. This is actually within your interlocal agreement, acquisition of land for phase 2 throughout there. And it has a diagram. Let's look at the budget that was actually approved back then or estimated. Stormwater improvements, 29 million, 100 acres of acquisition for this project, 100. That was completely changed under a consent agenda item. And now it's a concrete ditch. What do we have in 2019? 587,000 for stormwater treatment. And somehow the estimated 1 million for planning and design is now 3.5 million. What happened? Next slide, please. This is what you got. What you have on the right is your approved master plan. And I'd like you to really look at this. Does this look change to you? The right and the left, what's missing? 100 acres on the right.
30 seconds.
Now on the left, what do you see? Is there any blue at all on that? None. Next slide, please. This is part of your project summary here, and I can't really get into all the details here, but just think about it. Was this project substantially changed? When we try to move those houses, we can't do it. It's a new project, substantial amendment, blah, blah, blah. Was that project changed?
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Epstein.
Next speaker is Bill Peoples, followed by Stanley Sims. Name and address for the record, please.
Madam Chair, board members, I'm Bill Peebles. I live at 3056 Plasticoa Road. I'll talk to you today about the airport. Hey, Mayor, how you doing? I want to talk to you today about the airport gateway, a project I know and unfortunately too much about. There are really 2 airport gateway projects. There's Spring Hill, which has been an approved Blueprint project for 20 or more years. Has always made sense to everybody as an airport gateway. Then there's the FSU component of the airport gateway. FSU came to the IA in 2017 and said, we have the smallest campus in the state, landlocked, we've got nowhere to grow. The Southwest campus, where we have 700 acres, is the vital future of Florida State University, and we need you to construct this gateway access to it. It was entirely an my neighborhood was directed to negotiate with FSU. FSU entered into the letter. President Thrasher appeared on that screen right there and told you how to the future of the university. And the idea that amendment 2018 Southwest Campus Plan. And what happened, as far as I can tell, in 2021, FSU promulgated their campus master plan. That's a legally binding document that the city and the county are both involved in helping them formulate that talks about what development they can do out there for the next 10 years. It shows one building that's a holdover from some previous plans. There's no development that can be done legally for the next 10 years to facilitate the FSU Southwest campus. And I think what happened is explained in a quote from David Coburn, who was the chief of staff to President Thrasher when the Gateway was approved. And on his kind of exit interview with the Democrat, he said, Coburn thinks one day additional FSU sports will be stationed near the park due to pressure to have property in the middle of the main campus for academic reasons. FSU's facilities for golf, swimming, and indoor tennis are already located on land in South Carolina. So as it stands right now, you're poised to spend $36 million of blueprint money to build a road to service some intramural fields. And I would suggest to you that there are more
30
projects.
seconds.
And just mention a few examples: North Monroe Gateway, the fairgrounds, Orange Avenue widening, FAMU entryways, Southside Gateway. These are all more important, more urgent projects. And I assume that the reason FSU is not here today is because they're no longer, I have to assume, they're no longer as vitally interested in this as they once were. And I think at the very least, what we do is reprioritize the FSU portion of it so that these other projects can move up and be addressed more quickly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples.
Our next speaker is Stanley Sims. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Stanley Sims. I am the founder and the executive director of a nonprofit organization called HELP, Helping Entrepreneurs Leverage Prosperity. In this particular area on the agenda to address this area. This budget, where you decide how to out non-competitive bids for small and entrepreneurs in the area, does not offer equal. And that's going to be proved further on in this meeting. It's not every day. When I came back to Tallahassee exiting from a correctional, I didn't have the money to start a campaign, a political PAC, but I started a community engagement. I did not have the money to go around and leverage and buy political elected officials and some community officials, but guess what I had? I had a justified need that not only I was experiencing, but those was experiencing as well. I stand here not as one who complain and not try to address, because right now, directors, you are currently looking at the only entrepreneur, small black businessman that has ever applied for this OEV. Right the years that it has been given out. I'm the only one. What happened? Was it all bad? No, it's not all bad, because out of me applying and being turned down, you decided to put policies in place. Well, those policies still did not give me equity, but hopefully today, shine a light on the privilege of the Somo wall that is getting ready to get more money than we gave Amazon, and Amazon is giving us $1,000, and he's giving us 1,000 in jobs, and he's giving us another liquor store on the south side.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Next speaker is Deborah Holton. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Holton, 717 Old Bainbridge Road in the historical Frenchtown area. I come this afternoon to speak on behalf of the foodies pickup and delivery. For me, what has happened in our area, in our community, is that the small businesses are being ripped by the major delivery companies. With foodies, what I've seen in my revenue is a great increase. They built an app for me. They put me online. They don't charge me much of anything. All of my money goes to Miss D's Kitchen. They takes away nothing. So I would like to see this team increase, grow, so that they can help the mom and pops or smaller business to create a revenue where we can stay, without cost what is happening. And also in our area, we are what they would call low income, but if we could put together some type of different programs and stuff to help our communities come up and to be educated in some type of way, rather than pouring money into places. I feel that we will stand a chance on standing. Thank you all so much. I'm cutting it short because and I'm not going to explain it. Commissioner Cox knows what's going on, but I wanted to take the opportunity to come in and just speak on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that was our final speaker on the budget.
Thank you. Commissioners, there are individuals here that speak on an agenda item that's under our business sector, and they would like to in obligations. Do we need to vote on that, Madam Attorney, or is it? It's your. Okay. Well, I would like to allow them to speak at this. You have their cards, Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's entertain them at this point.
For item number 6, I have Nate Davis, followed by Wyatt Hendricks, then Max Epstein.
Item number 6 under our business portion.
Item number 6.
Thank you.
Nate Davis. Next would be Wyatt Hendricks.
Absolutely. You're giving you discretion to speak now if you'd like. Okay. Any others? Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, we will proceed then. Mr. Director, you have, are you ready to present any budget workshop items?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask the Blueprint Director to provide a very brief presentation that will also include the informational items, previous workshops, and then have opportunity to discuss budget.
You, Artie. Go ahead and get this short presentation started. Today, I'll do this. It'll provide some information on the airport gateway, the North Road, as well as an update on the analysis for affordable housing. Of course, you guys in your discussion and direction will all be forwarded to the ratification item in regular meeting today, and then ultimately incorporated into our final budget public hearing on September 26th, which is next Tuesday. This is our third workshop on the fiscal year 24 budget, and as I mentioned, we have some additional information for you that we'll present. At the last meeting on August 24th, you took a substantial amount of action to incorporate recommendations B and then E through J into the budget, and you'll see those on Tuesday. So jumping right into the capital improvement program, structure capital improvement program for fiscal year 24, allocation of $180 million to maintain our project progress consistent with over 8 years of IA board prioritization and direction to date. This is $308 million to continue those projects, but when coupled with prior year investments, that's over $750 million investments back into our community, with almost $400 million on projects on our south side. Looking out to 2040, all of the projects are fully funded, and that does rely on bringing in a substantial amount of funding, particularly from the Florida Department of Transportation. And we've already had a very record to date in bringing in those dollars. Over $425 million has been secured and applied to the blueprint projects. The proposed 24 budget does account for inflationary effects, where we see increased sales tax revenues, but those are also balanced by increases in our cost estimates. The IA board has implemented a construction-ready strategy, so that means getting as many of these projects ready for construction in the early years of the program and then bringing them to fruition very quickly. Advancing these projects brings the benefits to the community from a quality of life standpoint, of course, more quickly, but it also job and the long-term investment in these infrastructure improvements and their impact on economic development in our community. We've seen tried and true where these infrastructure investments result in private sector investment and activity occurring right next door. The financing plan includes a $227 million bond strategy plus state infrastructure bank loan. In summary, the infrastructure budget achieves a work program that aligns with all of your prior direction. It's a balanced plan, so that means the revenues coming in are on the other side of the scale with the expenditures coming out. It fully funds all of our infrastructure projects by 2040 and initiates the construction of 18 high-caliber projects. And I know in front of you and on your consent agenda, you have a copy of our annual report. I'm happy to provide additional copies of this report to anybody. It shares our accomplishments in fiscal year 23. And one of those is the recognition of the projects that you direct and have the vision for. And congratulations, you won 8 awards last year. Also, this year, we looked at our utilization of minority and women businesses for fiscal year 21 and 22. And I'm happy to report that we exceeded the goal for both of those years, incorporating our minority and women firms into the design and construction of these projects. And that's another benefit of advancing these projects more quickly into the community, is it allows us to bring in more dollars to minority and women firms. So next we'll talk about the Airport Gateway, North Monroe Gateway, and affordable housing. So jumping right into Airport Gateway. So the board asked us to bring an analysis of removing segments of the Airport Gateway project, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. But just as a background, the Airport Gateway creates 2 attractive, safe, multimodal gateways between downtown and the airport. This project was substantially amended in 2018. That process took 6 months, and we had over 25 community meetings to gain feedback on that substantial amendment. It supports the growth of Innovation Park in the Southwest Campus area and protects our neighborhoods by redirecting traffic, and I'll touch on that in a second. 7 miles of new and enhanced roadways and 12 miles of multimodal. In 2022, we did an economic impact analysis of the construction of this project, and that identified 723 jobs created just through the construction of the Airport Gateway. The 2024 estimated cost for this project is $118 million, of which 6.2 has already been encumbered or expended. So your analysis in front of you provides, your agenda materials provides an analysis of removing segments A, B, C, D, and Levy Avenue. And just as note, those were the segments that were added through the substantial amendment process back in 2018. One of the benefits of this addition is that as that area in the Innovation Park, Southwest Campus area grows, it will continue to create and generate more traffic with destinations and origins. So right now, the north and the east entrance and the most used entrance into the Innovation Park area is Levy Avenue through the heart of the hill in the Providence neighborhood. This would shift 80% of that traffic up to the northern boundary of Providence onto Stuckey Avenue. and it would remove completely the cut-through traffic that we see now in Callan on Potsdamer. After the substantial amendment was approved in 2018, Blueprint entered into a letter of agreement with FSU whereby they committed to several key things. One, they committed to contributing $3 million towards the cost of the construction of Segment C. Two, they committed to donating the right-of-way for Segment C and other various parcels in the project. And the third thing that they committed to was providing up to 2 acres for a new community park in the Providence neighborhood. Altogether, those segments cost $40 million, of which $3.4 million has been encumbered and expended, which leaves $36.7. But should the IA board direct changes to remove these segments, then we would need to evaluate the traffic impacts on the remaining segments, which would be G, E, and F, or Spring Hill Road and North Lake Bradford. And a portion of that 36.7 may need to remain and be implemented on those other segments to mitigate for some of the traffic impacts. So Providence neighborhood was a big voice in this substantial amendment process in 2018, and Blueprint staff has continued to coordinate with them over the years. We mentioned Stuckey Avenue. We talked about with the Providence neighbor how improvements like seen on FAMU Way could now be brought across Lake Bradford Road onto Stuckey Avenue, helping them to realize that sort of multi-family and multi-use vision for the Stuckey Avenue corridor. Of course, we talked about Levy Avenue. One of the commitments in the Airport Gateway project is to return Levy Avenue to a neighborhood street. So we're getting really close to finishing the design for that improvement. I mentioned the community park, and of course, neighborhood signage was committed. This graphic, I'm not going to talk to it, but it just shows the different segments and the estimated cost for each segment. Next steps, based on all the IA board direction to date, is to bring Segment C, Segment G, and the Levy Avenue improvements to construction next year. All of those segments are reaching 60% design, which is a major milestone in the design process. Essentially, once you reach 60% design, you start moving into permitting. So should the IA board direct the removal of those segments from the Airport Gateway process, that would trigger the substantial amendment, just as it was triggered when the segments were added to the project in 2018. But the board really has 2 options here. One is to continue the project as previously directed, and the other is to direct staff to initiate the substantial amendment process. So quickly moving into North Monroe Gateway. Again, the board asked us to bring back an item for expanding North Monroe Gateway to I-10. Currently, the project involves gateway enhancements like signage and pedestrian safety and landscaping from 7th Avenue up to I-10. So that's the area where we've already seen a lot of investments consistent with the North Monroe Gateway project, Blueprints project, having already been made by DOT. In fact, they've already invested and contributed $16.5 million towards sidewalks and gateway enhancement and landscaping. And your draft budget materials include a little over $4 million towards additional gateway enhancements on Blueprint. So Blueprint has been extremely successful in securing those DOT funds on those state roads. This is just a great example of that. So $4.5 million would help to complete this project for the North Monroe Gateway. Where do we find those improvements? Well, we went back to an adopted Leon County Citizens North Monroe Task Force report. So that task force report laid out infrastructure improvements for the North Monroe Gateway. So we've identified a cost estimate for those, and that's what's programmed into your draft budget to get those estimates completed, or to get those infrastructure improvements completed. So expanding it north of I-10, if the board chooses to expand this project, that would also trigger the substantial amendment process. But wanting to see what type of improvements could be made north of I-10, so capturing it as a gateway for people coming south on Highway 27. We look back at that same Citizens Task Force report, which takes it all the way up to Fred George Road, and identified $15 million worth of infrastructure improvements that could be made within the public right-of-way. As you know, this is a state road, so the idea of getting DOT funds to make these infrastructure improvements has a strong possibility. And earlier this week at the CRTPA meeting, they talked a little bit about getting that process started. Affordable housing. So again, at the August 24th meeting, the board directed us to begin a review of affordable housing opportunities within the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency. And this review has spanned the infrastructure team, but also great coordination with OEV and the legal group, as well as so this analysis is underway, and we're going to be bringing it back to you at your November 7th meeting. But just to note, kind of keeping in theme with the substantial amendment, if you want to pursue affordable housing opportunities under the infrastructure side, that also would require a substantial amendment to add an affordable housing project to the Blueprint program. So bringing it in for a landing, budget recommendation A. So you have 3 recommendations that are consideration from your original May workshop materials. That's A, C, and D. So A involves a current fiscal year budget reallocation from 2 projects, one Capital Circle Southwest right-of-way. The right-of-way has already been purchased on that, and those funds are no longer needed. In fact, they were actually reimbursed from DOT. This is one of our leveraging pieces here. So we recommend putting that onto the Northeast Gateway Phase 1 construction, which is ready to be constructed now. The second one is from the Lake Lafayette and St. Mark's Regional Linear Park. As we'll talk about with agenda item number 7, there are many milestones that they're in progress on that project, but we've identified that the remaining trail components are infeasible. So we recommend moving that $3.4 million into the Market District Park so that we can start to get that park under construction. Budget recommendation C is the big one. That's the 5-year capital improvement plan. We've laid out and provided for you the 5-year capital improvement plan in May, and then in August, and then in these materials as well. This directs the expenditure of over $3 million to continue the implementation of our key community projects. And then finally, recommendation D is just looking out over the long term. So whatever direction you provide to us today on your 5-year plan, we'll then play that out over the 20-year period. Of course, reflective of all of the priorities to date, as well as any that you give us direction on today. So as I mentioned, these will all be all your direction will be ratified at the meeting later and then incorporated into the final public hearing budget materials for next Tuesday, September 26th, 3 p.m. right here. So today we ask for your approval and discussion on the 5-year on the budget. Thank you.
Matter overview and directorship. The last budget, we did have items A and D, which Autumn just with us that we need to resolve. Commissioner Minor, do you recognize? Okay, second. Thank you. Welch seconds the recommendation. Discussion. All those in favor, let it be known.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
No worries. I'm gonna bring a big sign next time. I would just like to talk about some of these. We in budget recommendation A, we talk about Lake Lafayette Park, moving that money to Market District placemaking, and we'll get to talk more about that specific project in an agenda item. But I wouldn't feel comfortable not just speaking up and why I'm going to oppose this, since what we'll find later is 0 pennies from Blueprint 2020 have been spent on this Lake Lafayette Park so far. And we're going to find in our later agenda item that there's actually an opportunity to extend trails in lieu of sidewalk down Appalachia Parkway and connecting gaps that are desperately needed. And so that is why I'll be opposing recommendation A in reallocating $3.4 million from what I think is a critical project that we haven't spent any Blueprint 2020 money on yet. And then maybe I can get more information on this, but at our last workshop for budget recommendation C, where we're approving increases to all of the infrastructure projects, we started going through each project with an increase, and we made it through 4 of them. And are we not going to continue? Because this is where that would happen. And if not, then I'd like to get some information about the Northeast Gateway, which was 1 or 2 down, one I mentioned in the last meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Caban.
Madam Chair, so I had a similar thought. So are we not going to discuss the projects that we brought up last meeting? last meeting, we had a unanimous motion to discuss these projects, and the agenda in front of us just tries to bunch all the projects back together. So are we, I mean, for clarification, are we going to have the conversation about that, directors?
Commissioner Caban, I think if any directors specifically want to look at any specific project, I think staff is ready to, able to discuss that particular budget.
Why was the agenda laid out like that? We had a unanimous decision. The mayor in the May meeting said he wanted to discuss every project individually. And last meeting, we had unanimous vote to waive procedure. Like, what is this?
Commissioner.
No, to me, like, it's not even about, we had unanimous decision from the board. And this is just trying to slide this by for a quick vote, and it's unethical. So I'm going to make a substitute motion. I want to make a substitute motion to pick up where we were last meeting and discuss the remaining agenda items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Porter. Second. Sir. The motion was a substitute motion.
It was a substitute motion to pick up where we left off. We had unanimous board decision to go back and discuss these projects individually. And this, I can't even believe that we're just trying to ignore where we were last meeting to approve the rest of these items.
Madam Chair, if I can.
Yes, Madam Attorney.
Yes, the motion that was made and passed at the last meeting doesn't carry over to future meetings. It's not a continuation, recurring, continual motion. So if a director has a motion that they want to make concerning the recommendations that are before you, then they are free to make that motion. But it would, something that occurred at a previous meeting would not necessarily be applicable here.
I made the motion on the floor.
Let me recognize you, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Commissioner Porter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, so to clarify, because I remember this too, I mean, it was my that 2 meetings ago it asked for a workshop going project. So is it, Ms. Dawson, are you saying that we can't give direction about what comes back to us during our workshops?
No, let me just respond.
Madam Chair.
I think up to this question, and I think in response to Commissioner's comment, motion and second, I think if there's any project that we as a board want to discuss specifically, I think we're free to do that. I think we can do that. Am I correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Caban.
So I have a motion on the floor, so do I need to specifically,
Pull your
so I had a motion on the floor to pick up where we left off last meeting. Is that the correct motion to discuss these projects individually? I mean, I want to talk about the airport gateway. We had unanimous board decision to bring back an analysis, and I would like to discuss that.
Okay, just, did we get a second for that? Okay, she did. Okay, and I think the clarification would probably be not so much pick up where we left off, but I think the directors are free to raise any particular project that we want to discuss specifically. So if we want to discuss airport gateway, I think it's appropriate to do that. Or if we want to discuss some other property, it's appropriate to do that. Yes.
Making of the motion was with the assumption that though staff did not go by and discuss each particular project, that a motion starts off where we start from, and as if we want to have discussion, that we would discuss those projects during the discussion portion of it. Commissioner Caban, I think I was trying to really understand where you were trying to get to your motion. I think I understand where you're getting to is that you want us to have a discussion on each individual project. We can have that discussion on each individual project with the main motion that was on the floor. It's just a matter of what commissioners want to bring up which projects. Now, if we want to, let's say if we want to go back and say, okay, well then we don't want we don't want to discuss this at all today. What we would like to do is that we'd like to, then staff brings back each individual project with analysis, then you can make that substitute motion that we do that, and then we just not take up the budget at all today and just have staff come back and but the way they kind of did, I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys, staff broke down each project in here, but there's different way to get done what you want to get done. But the motion you have on the floor, basically, it says that you want to discuss each project, which is totally fine. You can do it with either one.
Okay, and let me interject this too. At our first workshop, we did go through, it might have been the second one. We went through about 4 or 5, and we were maybe at number 6. And most of the ones that we had gone through, maybe one we had some concerns about, but for the most part, it was consensus when we looked at what had been expended, what's expected to be expended, what's the projected overall cost. So I don't see any reason why we can't continue that discussion, Commissioner Caban. And if you want to specifically raise Airport Gateway, I don't see any prohibition in doing that. Am I correct, Madam Attorney?
Certainly, the commissioner is free to make any comments. There is a motion, the original motion on the staff direction. There is now a substitute motion. Is Commissioner Caban withdrawing that substitute motion and making comments as to whether or not he'll support the main motion? Is that where we are?
I don't think he's withdrawn the motion, but I think you would, with the understanding that within the motion on the floor, we can still discuss any one of those projects that are incorporated in AB. I'm sorry, in the 2 recommendations, 3 recommendations that are on the floor from staff.
In fact, if you wanted to, let's say
Commissioner
Northeast Gateway, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The Northeast Gateway was a specific project that you wanted to discuss. If, in fact, you didn't want that included in this budget, then the substitute motion you make would be to approve all other things except for Northeast Gateway, and if you want to extend I don't know if that's part of recommendation, but if you want to extend North Monroe, you can do that. That kind of gets you where I think you're trying to go. Thank you.
Let me recognize Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where the frustrations coming for is multiple board members want to discuss certain projects and the budget implications, and it all being collectively in one vote makes that a little difficult to talk about them individually. So, I mean, my recommendation would be if there are certain items in the budget specifically before we move on with the motion, if you would be willing to even withdraw it or bring those up individually, let's go ahead and take care of those first, because I'm happy to support most of what's in this motion, but it does have projects that have been mentioned, and I think we need to decide on those first. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Minor.
I don't think anyone here is to. I think the intent of a lot of people coming to this meeting here today, as well as I think Commissioner Caban, was that we would talk about some of these projects. And if I remember from the last workshop, specifically, we had brought up, the Airport Gateway project analysis, North Monroe, affordable housing. And so we've got some good analysis that was done, and staff did a great job writing those attachments. But I do think the assumption, at least at the end of that last workshop, was to discuss these projects. So there's a lot of money in this budget. It's a big deal. There are big projects here. And I think a lot of people attended today. They would be hearing us discuss and deliberate and actually have some citizen input on these projects. So I support Commissioner Caban. If his motion tends to have us speak about these 3 projects that have been provided with analyses.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Minor. Commissioner O'Keefe, I'm going to try to let everybody speak before I have one person speak on the same thing 2 or 3 times. Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam. When we're talking about 3 projects, let's just add Northeast one to talk about.
Thank you. Commissioner Caban.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, before we go into a vote on the substitute motion, is, because it was clear, we left off in the last meeting with multiple projects that we were intending on talking about. We ended the meeting with the intention and plan to talk about them. And the staff recommendations in these budgets, had we voted on the initial motion, would have approved every single previous project. So someone, I would like to know, who made this agenda?
Okay, Commissioner Caban, thank you so much. Let me just say this. I think staff does the budgets in the best interest of our meetings, but I think within the parameters of what we have here at the meeting, we can discuss each one of those specific projects, okay? So it's either a matter of the motion to accept staff recommendation hasn't been voted on, but within the motion and the second, we can still discuss each one of those projects. We can vote to change, amend, what have you. Am I correct, Madam Attorney? Within the first motion that's on the floor to accept staff recommendation, we can discuss each one of the projects that are concerning to any particular director. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, absolutely. And we can make any changes, recommendations to any of those projects. Am I correct?
By motion.
By motion. Oh, okay, okay. So Commissioner Caban, I think we've got the parameters to address each one within that first motion. If you want to consider withdrawing your motion, maybe, and let us do that so that.
I don't think that we're saying the same thing. So
Okay.
Commissioner Maddox, I'll withdraw my motion, but in your original motion, could you specify that we will leave out any other project to discuss? Can you make sure that those projects are
Commissioner
cut out?
Caban, yeah, just to me, let's try not to talk between commissioners. Yeah, direct your responses to me and to the floor. Yeah.
Okay, if Commissioner, how I'm interpreting these agenda items, if recommendation, moving the budget on the remaining projects that we have not discussed. Agree with what Madam Attorney is saying. She's saying that we need another different motion to pull them out. So what I said, what I propose, and my substitute is to pick up where we left off, which was discussing individually. The motion that is on the floor, it approves the rest of the remaining budget and doesn't discuss those projects.
The confines of commission matters, we can discuss each one of those projects, but so that we can move it along. Do you want to withdraw your motion?
Here's what I'll do. Just so everybody's on the same page. I've moved staff recommendation. I'll amend so to.
Okay. Okay. We got a substitute motion on the floor. Let me have him withdraw substitute. Are you willing to motion and allow, sir, so that we can move on?
And out of good faith,
The substitute.
The removing from a northeast way in.
So you're in approval A, C, E, foundation.
I would like to say something additionally. So that's a gateway budget.
Not approving.
Then I
It's approving staff recommendation, those three. Okay, awesome. Is there a second?
On my second.
He withdraws. Caban, second the floor now, Commissioner Caban. Thank you, Commissioner Caban. Airport Gateway.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Madam Chair. Keep taking on the floor
We have
and then discuss them one by one.
Everything excluding those three. So the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none. The motion is recommendation approval excluding those three gateways, which means we will do gateways. All those are saying aye. Any opposition?
Yes.
Commissioners are online, and Proctor, are you there? We're connected?
They're still on. They're muted.
They came in.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Okay, and what we'll do, yes, Commissioner Proctor.
Yes, ma'am, I'm present and alive and all those things.
Thank you. So we're going to vote on the motion that's on the floor, is to station regarding item B, A, C, and D, including the three gateways we will specifically discuss. So, Madam Clerk, will you do a roll call?
Mayor Daley? Aye. Commissioner Matlock?
Nay.
Commissioner Richardson?
Commissioner Richardson, are you there? Let's move on.
Cox?
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes, can you, yes.
this is Director Richardson. I just figured out how to, but I'm for the motion.
Thank you for your honesty.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Will you do a roll call for
Commissioner Richardson?
Aye.
Commissioner Cummings?
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Welch?
Move it.
Thank you. That's a roll call.
Passes.
Recognize Commissioner Caban. And the motion passed.
Passes, yes.
Madam Chair, for clarification, are we now discussing? Okay, thank you. Commissioners, to just reviewing the agenda material, and even after, this is truly just disappointing. This project really comes down to three aspects: accountability, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. First and foremost, holding staff, and frankly, a perfect example that is how this meeting just transpired with that agenda. Last meeting, we passed a motion unanimously to prepare an agenda that requests, in quotes, an in-depth analysis from detailed budget line items for each segment, showing what the project looks like without D&D, and also allocating funds for improvements. We're all passed unanimously. Rather than receiving an agenda item or analysis, in my opinion, we got a full court defense project. We still don't have a, we still don't know the cost of landscaping. We don't know the cost of lighting. We don't know how much asphalt we're going to use. We don't know how much concrete we're going to use. These are things for a line item full budget analysis when we're approving a project this month. It also clearly showed that this entire project is built around segment D. But my opinion on it is why. I believe this project is Park Gateway than it is Airport Gateway. Materials mentions Innovation Park equally as it does the airport gateway. Then this whole project, in my opinion, should be prioritized around Spring Hill Road. That map, it's shown that it is the route to the airport. Additionally, the agenda didn't any allocated funds for us to the neighborhood, and I interpret it kind of was a jab at the Providence neighborhood. We don't do this project in the way it's laid out now, that they're not going to get any money. Disappointed because we had unanimous support on my previous motion. The agenda item was even to come out the way it did. No further, I'm disappointed that this agenda came out the way it did. Next to me, this is transparency. There's a lot in this budget process with Blueprint. I've learned more about airport from staff than any agenda material that I've. Did anyone know that some of the roads for the airport get built with cobblestone pavers? Yesterday in my briefing, Director Call, I appreciate your time. It was a great briefing. We discussed have a detailed construction. We discussed how project percent design phase. That we mutually agreed in the briefing, we won't know the true cost of this project until we have full construction documents. So for me, I have a hard time with proving this budget the way it is right now without knowing exactly how much this project is truly going to cost. So on a $40 million project increase, it's not lack of responsibility. And my last point, I want to make this.
Clarification, Madam Chair. It seems like we're having discussion without a motion actually being on the floor. Is really the Robert's Rules of Procedures which govern how this is to proceed. So usually there's a motion, there's some discussion.
Isn't this
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mayor.
Respectfully disagree with the attorney. A workshop to have discussion and see what form of emotion. This is stated meeting where we are voting to officially workshop. Me personally, I'm very comfortable with Christian Caban, other commissioners. Comments is time for us to have discussion. If we don't have this, we have discussion.
Hold on just a minute. Can we get a follow-up to that, Attorney, since this is a workshop?
The Parliament and you and advise the board. It is ultimately your decision to decide how much discussion time you want to have each particular item, or in terms of each under rules is actually and is wise if you want to be strict about it. Generally, you do have a. It is your discretion.
Thank you, Section, Madam Attorney. And what I'll do is just commissioners to express, but I do want you to be mindful. Try to keep it to three if you can, and I try to get to everybody without having person speak before. Commissioner O'Keefe, did I see your name?
I wasn't done.
Oh, you did. All right. Commissioner.
My last point I would like to make fiscal responsibility. Commissioner Welch, we had.
Commissioner, don't direct your comments to individual commissioners. Just
okay. Well, we had a great conversation last meeting about the Northeast Park. We unanimously just hold that to its original. Right. I'm going to stand by